Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this webinar, the 11th in a series of webinars that the LEAP Client Success team are running. These webinars aim to improve the way small law firms implement the features of LEAP in the cloud. My name is Bianca Hale and I am the Client Success Manager for LEAP clients in South Australia, Western Australia and the Northern Territory. Joining me today is Jake, who looks after our firms in New South Wales and the ACT. Today's webinar is focusing on one of our most requested webinar topics and one of the most commonly asked questions of our help desk, how to create and modify precedents in LEAP. So as with all of our educational webinars, this webinar will run for approximately 30 minutes and will be conducted in listen-only mode. Feel free to type any questions into the GoToWebinar question feature throughout the duration of today's webinar. Although we may not be able to respond to your question while we're presenting, we'll collate all the questions into an FAQ document which will be sent out to you with a recording of the webinar. So this recording will be made available to you in the next couple of days. So if you miss anything, you can always go back and rewatch the presentation in your own time. In today's webinar, we will be covering key concepts that will assist you when working with precedents in LEAP. We will be looking at how to edit your letterhead, how to create both Word and Outlook precedents, how to create a file label with fields, and finally, how to store and manage your firm's precedents. So let's jump straight into how to edit your letterhead. Your firm's letterhead is one of your LEAP document types. Document types are the templates that all your letters, faxes and other types of documents are based on and would have been set up by a LEAP certified consultant when LEAP was first installed at your firm. It is important to understand that any changes to your document types will affect all precedents based on that document type. Most of the information in your document types will be coming from fields such as your firm details, data from the matter for the recipient's address, or your reline, so you really should not have to change your document types very often. Again, we must present a clear warning that when working with your document types, any changes that you make to your document types will affect all of your existing precedents. So for example, if your firm has been accredited as a specialist in an area of law and you want to add an image regarding this accreditation to the footer of all your letters, you only need to add this image to the footer on the letter document type, and this change will then be made to every single letter that you create from that point onwards. So this includes by lawyers that you access through guides and precedents, and your letter precedents that have been created from scratch using the letter document type. Today we'll use the example of adding an office closure message to your letters. This means we only have to edit our letter document type to add the message once, and then that message will be included in all our letters we generate in future. So to edit a document type, first open any matter, then click on More Types. We need to choose the document type that you wish to edit. Note here that letter is linked to the new letter icon on your matter, so this is going to be a most used document type. So we need to right click on this and actually select Edit. We then need to place our cursor where we want our message to appear and begin typing. Or we can just copy and paste it from another source as well if we like. So this is where you might be changing things like spacing, your logos or margins, any change like that. So we're going to put it just underneath Reg Kelly's name in the footer of our document. So before closing this document type, we want to ensure that we leave the document how we want to open it up each time that we create a new letter. So we need to put our cursor where we're going to start typing. We hit Save and Close in the top left corner. And we enter a reason for our change. So we're going to say January, February, office closing message. So if we were to generate a new letter now, we're going to see this message at the end of our letter. And this is going to be across the firm, so it's going to be for every user. Other changes you might need to make to your letter document type are removing some extra spaces and altering your margins so your printed letters fit nicely into a window-faced envelope. You might need to update your firm logo, or perhaps even adding an automatic signature to your letters. So to remove this message or to make any other changes, we go back into this document types list and we can either right click and select Edit to make changes, or we can select History of Changes at the very bottom. We click on the version of the letter that precedes the closing message that we just created, and we select Set to Current to revert to that version. While we're on this window, This History of Changes window is available on every document type, precedent, and every document saved within a matter. This window allows you to monitor which version of the precedent or document you are using and to revert to a previous version if required. So it helps rectify any mistakes that you may have made in the process of changing your document types or modifying one of your precedents. You can also use the buttons along the top to preview a certain version of the document or to compare two versions by holding down the Control key and select an alternate line and clicking on this compare icon along the top. So that was how to edit your letterhead and other document types. So if you need to make complicated changes to your document types, it is recommended that you contact a LEAP certified consultant to assist. So now let's look at creating and accessing basic precedents. To access and create precedents in LEAP, you first need to open a matter. When creating precedents, to ensure you have access to the relevant fields, you should open a matter that the precedent is going to relate to. For example, if you're going to create an initial letter to a buyer on a conveyancing file, you should open a purchase file. To access the precedents, click on Guides and Precedents along the top. If you can't find the precedent that you are looking for, you can click on the Search tab along the top and type in the precedent name. You'll notice that as you start typing, the list of precedents narrows down, and you also have the option, there's a state drop down towards the right, and this will then only show you the precedents applicable to that state. When you find the precedent via the Search tab, if you want to see its location in the folder structures, you can right-click on the precedent and click this View Precedent Location. This will then take you back to the folder where the precedent is located. You can modify any formal precedent within LEAP, whether the precedent was created by LEAP, by lawyers, or has been created by someone in your firm. Before demonstrating how to modify a precedent, we'd like to briefly discuss duplicating precedents. So when modifying a precedent that has been provided by LEAP or by lawyers, you can first make a duplicate of the precedent and then modify the duplicate. If you make changes to the original precedent, to receive any updates from LEAP or by lawyers, you'll need to right-click and select Revert to Standard. So in this example, we're going to show you how to duplicate a precedent, then modify the duplicate. We will use the example today of modifying a letter sent to a client who retained our services for advice regarding the setup of their company. So we're going to go back to the matters list and open a matter that relates. We're going to click on Guides and Precedents, and under the Browse tab, this letter that we want to look at is under the Finalisation section of the company precedents. Okay, so we want to create a more detailed version of this letter. So we're going to right-click and select Duplicate Precedent. And this is creating an exact copy of the precedent for us. So now to modify this copy, we need to right-click on the precedent and select Modify. And this is going to bring up the precedent for us to make our necessary amendments. So again, you can simply type in the text or you can copy and paste from another source. So this final paragraph, we're going to make a few changes to personalise it further. And once you're happy with what you've written, you can select Rename and Close in the top left. So we recommend that you use something that identifies your firm so it's clear that this precedent has been modified by your firm specifically. At this point, once we click OK, we'll be presented with a screen that asks for the reason of our change. So we recommend that you enter as much detail as possible here, as this information is shown when you look at the history of changes of a precedent. So in here we can see our full reason that we've given here. Okay, so we've looked at how to modify an existing letter precedent, but now let's look at creating a new letter precedent. So before creating precedents, you'd need to determine where you'd like it to be saved. So I want to create a generic letter advising the client of an upcoming court date. This is going to be on a criminal file, so we'll open up a criminal law matter and click on the Guides and Precedents along the top. Now I want this letter to be saved in the top folder that's called Criminal and Traffic. And then in the bottom of the right-hand side, we need to right-click and select New Word or Excel precedent. Now I'm creating a letter and it's sending to the client. So we click OK. Now this is going to link back to my letter document type that we looked at earlier. So all we need to do at this point is add in our precedent wording. And once again, paste or copy and paste or type it in. And when you're happy with what you've written, you can select the rename and close icon along the top. Once again, we're going to give this a meaningful name and click OK. So we've just created a letter precedent. And another precedent that you might like to create is an Outlook precedent. So I want to continue with the above example, but look at an email instead. So if we go back into Leap, to create this, I need to right click on the right side again, but I need to select Outlook precedent. I'll select the client's name and click OK. So this is going to open up a new Outlook email for me to work on. You can see here that there's no email signature displayed. If your Outlook is set so your email signature will insert automatically on a new email, when you generate this email precedent, your signature is going to appear like normal. In the subject line here, if this is left blank, the default reline you've set up for this matter is going to populate here. But if you'd like something more specific written, we can type in here too. So we're going to type in important your next court date. Now in the body, we want to type the same wording that we used in the letter. So we're going to say, we confirm we attended the magistrate's court, and would continue that on like we did for the letter. You could have as many paragraphs here as you like, depends on how detailed you want your letters to be. If you needed to, you could also attach documents here if you had standard information sheets or any attachments you wanted to add. Something I do want to add on this that we'll go through is I want to have Dear and the client's name at the beginning of this email. So if we just go a few enters, we're going to type Dear and we're going to add the client's name to the beginning of this. So if we click on Insert along the top, you have a Leap ribbon there that says Insert. And this is going to give us a list of fields available. So I need to place my cursor where I want the field, and I'm going to find the card Dear field. Now we'll be covering fields in a bit more detail later in this webinar too, so we'll explain the ways to know what field you need and how to easily find them then. Okay, so for the moment we're done with this precedent, so we're going to click on Save and Close along the top and create a name for this. So once again, you'd use the same principles with your letter. We'll just say SRM Law, email to client with the next court date. So we'll click OK, and that's saved in there for us. So now we have a few custom precedents created. To better store and manage your firm's precedents, you're able to create folders. So to do this, you need to determine where you'd like the folder, right-click and select New Folder. In here, you can type the name of the folder and click OK. Then you'll see your new folder appear in your list. To move the precedents into your folder, there are two methods which I'd like to demonstrate to you today. The first method is using the same cut and paste functionality that you might already be familiar with in the day-to-day use of your computer. So to do this, we can right-click on a precedent and select Cut. Then we navigate to the location we want to put it, and we can right-click and press Paste. And that's going to move the original precedent into that new location. So it's important to note that cutting removes the original precedent, while when copying, the original precedent remains in both locations. Now I didn't actually do that cut and paste then because I want to show you the second method. This one is a drag and drop. So to do this, I need to locate the precedent, and I can just drag and drop it into whichever folder I need it to be, either on this left-hand side or just above if I needed. What you can also do is move multiple precedents at the same time. So if I hold Control on my keyboard, I can highlight two items, and then if I hold Alt on my keyboard, I could move both of those into that SRM Law folder. So moving precedents leads us to the shortcutting option available. Shortcut a precedent. The shortcut remains linked to the original precedent, and these shortcuts are useful when the same precedent is required in two or more locations. Using a shortcut instead of duplicating a precedent means that only one precedent needs to be updated and maintained. Because the shortcut has a link to the original precedent, any changes that you make to the original will also flow through to any of the shortcuts that have been created. So to create a shortcut, locate the precedent, right-click and say Create Shortcut. And you can see when a shortcut has shown up when there's a little small arrow in the bottom left of an icon. So looking at these ones, you can also shortcut folders as well as precedents. So if we had a folder perhaps down here under Practice Management, there's a Cost Agreements We might want that shortcutted in multiple locations, so I can right click on that and say create shortcut. The same principle applies like it did with the letter that I shortcutted. I could move that shortcut folder up under criminal as well. Okay, so another tool that you can use to assist in managing your firm's customised precedents is adding an extra tab to your guides and precedents window. So if we go into Leap, in the top right tools option, commonly referred to as the hamburger icon, there is an option to show custom precedents tab in here. So we've got this ticked at the moment. So that gives us this extra tab along the top here. Now, any precedents listed under this tab have been modified or created specifically by your firm. So this is a personal setting, so this extra tab will only appear on this machine. And if you want this to be on everyone's machine in the office, each computer will need to select this option in their Leap. Okay, now finally, we want to go through how to create a customized file label for your firm and work with some fields. Okay, so going back into Leap, we need to find where we want to save it first. So I just want to put it just under practice management where we are now. When you right click in this precedents window, you have the option to import. If you import a precedent, it will import as is into Leap, and it's not going to be linked to a document type like we were showing earlier with your letter precedent. Now I have a base file label saved on my desktop, and because this doesn't need to be linked to my letter or any of my other document types, it's fine to import this. Once it has imported, I can right click and modify to make some changes. Okay, so this takes us into how you can insert fields into your precedent so they automate with data for you. So to access the available fields, click on the editing drop-down from your Leap toolbar and select Insert. And this opens us up with a side panel in Word. The tab we're currently sitting on is called Fields along the top. And this provides us with a list of fields available to insert. Along the top, there's also this drop-down bar. And in this drop-down, there are the different table types that are on this type of matter. Now, as we said initially, this is why it's important to open a matter that the precedent relates to. If you aren't in the correct type of matter, these table types would not be the ones you need to make your precedent. So when you start to think about the types of fields you want, sometimes it's best to look at Leap and this side panel in Word at the same time. So this is where having a second screen could be very helpful. So if we look back in Leap, you can see that this list of table types on the matter matches some of those options available in this drop-down over here in Word. So we're going to start with some simple fields, the client's details. So in this drop-down, we're going to select Client. And now all the fields underneath relate to the client specifically. There's a search fields in the top right, and this is going to help us to find what we're after. So first, I just want to add in the client's name. So if I type name, it's going to find fields based on that for us. And for this label, I'd like the first name to look different to the last name, so I'm going to need two fields. I can see in the list there's a people first name and a people last name. So to insert these fields, I need to place my cursor where I want the fields to appear. And I can either double click to insert the field, or I could single click and click on insert along the bottom. Those are inserted onto my document. Now both of these fields I want bold, so I'm just going to highlight them, and I can use my regular Word shortcuts to make that bold, or the bold icon to make that change. But one thing I do want is to make this last name to appear in capitals. So if I highlight this last name, and we need to look back into the editing drop down along the top of your Leap toolbar. In here you've got an option to format fields just underneath where we went for insert. On the left hand side of this window we have field types. This Wilson is a text, and then on the right hand side we can see the different formats, and this one I want to be in uppercase. So now at this point we'd like to explain a command that is very useful when working with fields, and that is Alt and F9. So if we hold down Alt key and at the same time select the F9 key on your keyboard, we can see that this toggles between showing the data to showing the fields themselves. And this also lets you see what type of formatting you have applied to the field. So we can see behind the last name we've got this upper, so that means uppercase. So I also want to add the client's address to this label. So I first want to consider if I need the street address itself or if I'd like the postal address to display. And in this case I want the postal address. So I'm just going to delete name from that search. I'm going to type in postal and see what comes up for me. So there's a few different options, and you should never be afraid to insert a few just to see what they look like and then pick the one that suits you. So in here, I'm just going to put in postal address and see what this looks like. So this one has a return embedded, and it looks like you would see on a letter. Now I'm just going to put a few enters and just have a look at some other fields. So if I look at this postal address across, this is a field that would work very well in a sentence because it only takes up one line. For this file label, I want to use this first field, so I'm just going to move that into the address box. I want to jump back now to some matter-based information that I need on this label. So if we look at the drop-down options over here, there's a matter option towards the bottom. Under this heading, if I just delete postal in the search, you'll find general matter information like the matter type, matter description, instruction dates, and who's working on the file. I want the matter description, so I'm going to type description. And nothing's shown up at the moment, but I know it exists. So right down the bottom, I'm going to tick this show hidden fields. And now I can see my matter description field. So I want to put my cursor where I want it and just double click. So now at this point, I want to go back into Leap to talk you through the differences between a few of these fields because I know a few people get stuck here. So we're just going to go back into Leap and have a look at the matter type line. Okay, so in Word, if you were looking for the matter type field, this is going to pull in what's written on this left-hand side, the matter type itself. Whereas the matter description field that I used is what's going to pull in from this field here. So it's called description, just along the top. Now, sometimes this is going to be the same information. So the matter type might look the same as the description, but sometimes people like to type more information into the description box, and you might want this specifically to appear in your label. So as I mentioned earlier, this is where referring back to Leap could be useful to work out what field you might need to search for. So if we go back into our label, another common field is the file number. So I just want to delete that text that's there, go back to the matter and type in file number, and I can double click to put that in. And I'd also like to include the person acting initials in this box as well. So same principle, delete that and type person acting. A few different options here. I just want the initials in this case. And now our label started to take shapes. You could spend some time on this, making it bold, making it bigger, smaller text. But our label started to take some shape now. So when you start working on your precedents, you need to remember that you don't need to fully automate something in one go. You can look at these more of a work in progress and do a little bit at a time. So we've come to the end of our topics for this session, and with practice you should now be able to edit your firm's letterhead, create a basic letter or email precedent, create a customized file label with fields, and store and manage your firm's precedents. Now Jake will be joining me to ask me some questions that have come through during today's webinar.
Thanks, Bianca. Hello, everyone. Yeah, there have been quite a few questions that came through today. There's a couple that I've picked out that I think would be good to go through with you today. So if it's okay, Bianca, I might ask you these and you can answer them for our clients today. So the first one that's come through is wondering whether you need to use the history of changes method in order to remove the out-of-office message that we demonstrated how to put into our letters today.
Sure. So when I added that office closure message, I right-clicked and selected Edit to put it in. You can use that exact same method to remove it. So using the history of changes was just one way and reverting to a previous version, but you can always just right-click, Edit, make whatever changes you need. So that could be good if you put the office closure in but also removed a few spaces at the same time. You could just remove it that way.
Perfect. Makes sense. Thanks, Bianca. The next one was to do with the Custom Precedents tab. So this question has come through saying that they think this is a nice function that's going to really help them locate their own precedents. But they want to know if they switch it on their computer, is everyone in the office going to see it, or is it just going to be specific to their machine? Which is a good question.
So that one is a specific setting. So if you've got it on your computer, it's only on yours. You'd need to get everyone in the office or whoever you want to have it to select that option in the options section. It's something you can turn on and off as well if you only want it on when you're working on with precedents or however you need to use it.
Perfect. Now, the last question, very important one. I'm glad someone did ask this. Someone has asked whether it's a bad thing that they have a lot of document types set up. So when I've been out visiting with clients, I've seen this a couple of times. Some firms will have a number of document types set up in the More Types section. And so someone wants to know whether that's bad and basically, yeah, our opinion on it.
Sure. So I've seen the same. I've seen some people have a huge list of different letters in their document types. We wouldn't recommend doing that. We would recommend you create those in the guides and precedents section. Reason being is if that means you've got consistency, because when you go into the guides and precedents, you can base all your letter precedents off of a letter document type. So that means all your letters, all your precedents are going to look exactly the same. And then if you make a change to your letter document type, all your precedents are going to update as well. So instead of having to change 10 different document types just to change your logo, you only have to change it once, all your precedents are going to update.
Perfect. That makes sense. And it would be fair to say that the easiest way for someone in this position to go about moving those across to the guides and precedents section would just be to create a letter precedent like we demonstrated today, and then just copy paste the content over, and then you can delete those document types once you've finished with them. That's all the time we had for questions today. I'm now going to hand back over to Bianca, who's going to finalise today's webinar. Thank you, everyone.
So that was some great questions. Hopefully we answered some for you. We encourage you to start creating your own precedents and giving what you've learnt today a try. We have another webinar actually following this one on more advanced functions. So if you have registered for this one, we're going to see you again shortly. So thanks again for joining us today, and hope you have a lovely afternoon.